Welcome to the Femininja Project. I am your host, Cheryl I Love, middle-aged ninja hiding in plain sight, dedicated to restoring human dignity one person at a time and helping you unleash your personal power. Discover that it's possible to look like a woman, act like a lady, move like a ninja, and think like a warrior. And remember, men are always welcome on the Femininja Project. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Femininja Project. And thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Today, I have a fantastic guest with me. Her name is Ann Martin. She is the owner and founder of the Empowered Leadership Movement, which helps people achieve the next level in their career, relationships, health, and every other aspect of their lives. And it is also a division of Mountain Mind Tricks. She is a former first responder who had neglected her own physical and mental health so she could focus on her service as a public servant. After being severely injured, she started down a path of self-healing, which included mental and emotional release, hypnotherapy, and meditation. She's also really wild about neuroplasticity, and we'll probably talk about that too, one of my favorite subjects. She is also a co-host of the Conscious Fire Culture podcast, which is about providing alternative mental health for wildland firefighters and connecting them with a network of practitioners that want to serve the wildland fire community. Anne, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Charlotte. I really appreciate the opportunity to share today.
You really have a fascinating background and an incredible work history.
I appreciate that. It's very diverse too. It's kind of in one area, and that's kind of in the first responder, public servant sector. But I have done a lot within that for sure. My story starts, we can kind of get into like the whole when I was a kid thing and then bring it all the way up to adulthood. Well, because it always has some sort of relevance to how you got to where you are today. Everything in your past got you where you are today. And that's one thing that I think we should all appreciate just a little bit. Sometimes not so great. Sometimes it's great. Have some gratitude. Goal for the day. Have some gratitude. When I was younger, I had a pretty good family of origin. I had a pretty good system of kind of growing up. I went to public school. I had a death in the family when I was quite young. I think I was 7 or 8 maybe. And that's kind of where my like leadership instincts kind of came from because my family didn't deal with it very well. So I self-imposed as a very young child to kind of like take care and take responsibility and take action in my family unit and try to make up for kind of the holes that were created from that passing. And I like took that and ran, and it was never a conscious thing for me. It wasn't like, oh, well, these things are missing and I just need to step up and do this. It was almost out of necessity. It was almost out of need for me because I wasn't getting my needs met. And that was a way for me to fill that void a little bit. So I became a doer and a helper. And that kind of perpetuated all the way up through, I graduated high school. I went to college in Colorado. I was a very initiative and integrity and just kind of like helpful bound kid. I started doing ride-alongs with fire departments and police departments. I finished college in 3 years with no debt because I worked 2 jobs at the same time. And then I graduated and went straight into a police academy. And I ended up going through the police academy and started working for a sheriff's department. And I started in the jail. And that was like my first experience with failure because I had kind of that perfectionist mindset. And that's something I struggled with for a long time. And you can say striving for perfection is good. I have kind of the opposite opinion in that it is not a really relevant or helpful skill. It's good to have an idea of it, but not something you should strive for or use. But I failed a test or 2 when I was in the academy. I still passed and everything, but it just was like a harsh reality for me to kind of encounter. And I failed for the first time in my training. Like I failed a unit and had to do it over again when I was on the street. And it was like, it like ruined me. My mental state was just like, oh my God, I failed this thing. And granted, they're just going to do it over so that I can relearn the skills and then continue through it. But that wasn't what was going on in my mind. I had got so stuck on, oh my God, I failed. What do I do? And I just, that like encompassed me for a long time. And I don't know if like that was kind of the beginning of just like my mental health qualms with like, I don't really care how I feel and it just matters on the results I produce and the service that I provide to people, but it was definitely part of it. So I did end up making it through training and actually becoming a very effective and actually very good police officer. I went through and attended a lot of different events and calls that were happy, a bunch of ones that were difficult, both in like trauma and in just like complexity even. I attended a few deaths that were very difficult for me and for other people, but it's kind of one of those things that you show up to those events and as a public servant, you don't want, a cop or a firefighter to show up and be freaked out. You don't want them to show up and start panicking like the people that are already there. No, you need to take your own emotions aside for a little bit and just focus on you revert back to your training a little bit, you get the job done, you help the people in the best way that you can, and then you move on. And the big problem with that is just not attending to your own emotions at that point. So you just kind of, I used to call it like a box. You just keep stuffing them in this little box and then kicking the box away from you every time it kind of shows up, and put them in the box, kick the box, put them in the box, kick the box. And that just kind of perpetuates for a really long time.
Yeah. How well does that work?
It doesn't at all. For the moment, it's just fine, but you have to recognize that box is still there and it needs to be dealt with. It's part of you. It's kind of like the thing that your shadow carries around is how I think about it. And I actually ended up getting injured a couple of times while I was at the sheriff's department, and decided after a while that it was not super safe for me in the position or the department that I was in. I was not getting the appropriate resources, and I wanted to come home safely every day. So I decided to leave the sheriff's department.
Were you in Colorado at that time?
I was.
Bill?
And I had decided that, well, I really like doing wildland fire. I did that for a season or two when I was in college. I said, maybe we'll just go back and make some money. I really enjoyed it. I was like, yeah, we'll just enjoy it and take winters off maybe. And I ended up sticking with that for another 8 or 9 years.
Wow.
I was in fire for quite some time. And I still play a role in wildland fire during the summer times, although I'm trying to completely phase myself out of it. I worked on hand crews, I worked on fuels crews, I worked on engine crews. And basically what that means is I worked in a truck, I walked around the woods, and I cut down trees.
Thank you, because I was wondering what that meant, and I'm sure the listeners were too. So thank you. That's a great explanation, right to the point.
And basically what that looks like is you get a call for a fire, and we go arrive at the fire, and we have a meeting that says, what's the plan? Because we can't just go sprint at it and just start squirting it with water, because when you have tree fires or fires that are, have kind of a big scope, you can't just run into them and just see what happens. So we have to have a plan. We communicate effectively, and we start working and chipping away at these things. It doesn't just happen in 2 seconds. And part of that was a little bit of the appeal to the whole job. We get to go out, be out in the woods. We get to enjoy time with this great group of people that we call kind of our second family, because you spend so much time with them. You get to watch incredible sunsets. You get to work really hard. The benefit of that is people still think you're kind of a hero, and it's kind of nice to hear that sometimes, although it's not very high up on the list. It's not that we don't appreciate the thank yous, but it's just we have other intentions and other values that we appreciate a little bit more. And I think the biggest thing that I kind of started to get away from in fire was that the support, it's kind of that resisting values system behind a lot of these public servant professions, is just that they're not supported in every way like they're supposed to be. A lot of the jobs are hard. Like I know you are a respiratory therapist, and the support that you get from the hospital is not always ideal. They don't cover you physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. That's a whole part of a person, but you're not getting a lot of support in that way from your employer, and it's not their job to tell you how to
Right.
believe or tell you how to do things. But if you start to have issues, you need to have support.
Right. But even though we didn't have that kind of support, at least we were in an environment that was safe. I mean, we didn't have flames licking, at our feet. We didn't have trees falling down around us. And as one other wildland firefighter put it to me, your friend Thomas Worm, you don't have bears charging out of the woods right in front of you when you are in a hospital. So you have another incredible level of stress and danger that normal people, the average person, does not even realize. I mean, I never even thought of stuff like that. And even when you're talking about felling trees and everything. So continue. I just had to interject that at least we were inside and safe.
Absolutely. And some of that, it's actually a conversation I had with somebody else recently, is we call it idiot complacency, or idiot is, you're trying to be really considerate. You're trying to be really effective at what you're doing, but you're disregarding some really important aspects all at the same time. So yes, things are dangerous, and we still come at them with a sense of urgency and a sense of safety. But if you get stuck in a situation for too long, if you get thinking about the wrong things, if you get tired, if you have lack of nutrition, all these things that still crop up after a fire season, then you start to neglect and ignore some of the signs of danger. And then those things like the fire and the bears start to be a problem. Normally it's a pretty easily negotiable risk as far as firefighters, because we're trained to deal with it, which is fine, which is why they're trying to make new laws and stuff now on how long and how much time you get rest between assignments. Cause it's usually 14 days on, 2 days off, 14 on, 2 days off for about 6 months at a time, between 3 and 6 months, depending on which crew you're on, which sounds like a lot.
Yeah. It sounds pretty brutal.
We do kind of get used to it, but it absolutely wears on you after a while, and physically mostly, but perpetually you don't get enough sleep. You don't sleep in a great area. Most of the time you're camping on the ground kind of a thing. So you don't have a nice bed. It's not usually very warm, although I like sleeping in the cold. But then sometimes you get showers. Most of the time you don't. Sometimes you have cell service to talk to your family at night. Sometimes you don't. There's just a lot of these things that just start to chip away at you after a while. Your crew becomes kind of your best friend. They become some of your biggest resources and some of your biggest helps. And that's where I was really lacking as far as just like finding the support I needed. I wasn't, other than like the task books we have of just like, these are the skills that you need. These are the skills that you need to follow and gain experience in. Great, improve your profession and just your work skills overall. But people forget that we are humans, like complete humans that have a lot of things that encourage and interact and have other aspects in our lives. So my mental health needs to be good. My physical health needs to be good. I need to have connection and communication with both my crew and my family. And so does everybody else. And when you can't really have access to that, or it's not supported or encouraged, then you start to fall apart almost after a certain time, because you just don't know what to do. You don't have the resources, like appropriate healthcare, appropriate mental health care, time for like meditation and reflection. During the fire season, when you're busy, we don't have time to work out. Part of the workout is the job, but you don't have time to like build appropriate muscle and refill your nutrition appropriately. Sometimes we're eating MREs. And for those of you that don't know what those are, that's like lifetime packaged meals that they serve to the military. It's the same thing. It's gross. And
I was going to say, not very tasty. And I'm sure it's not full of, whole foods and fresh vegetables and the things that you need to really fuel your body.
Depending on the area of the country you're in, occasionally you'll get some good food and you'll be super grateful for it and relish in it and try and slowly eat it and enjoy it. But it's not the norm, unfortunately. And I know there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes very slowly to try and get those changed, to get people paid the appropriate amount so that they can have a living wage to support a family in this type of profession, to get regular medical care that's actually, something worthwhile and something that will actually help and cure whatever you've got going on. Appropriate mental health care, because a lot of it is that kind of stoic culture, that type A culture of just suck it up, keep moving forward, push it down in your little box, and we have work to do. It's not encouraged. It's not almost allowed in some places. It gets in the way. And that's not how practitioners like my partner Thomas and I think about things. It's not a healthy way to go about life, especially in a profession that is this difficult. And this is kind of like this black sheep that a lot of the public doesn't understand as, we can call them civilians, but it's just people that don't actively work in a public service sector. That's just the type that kind of shows up in a lot of the things that make a whole human, the things that a lot of people enjoy, like their meditations or their prayer time. Some of that doesn't get honored, and it makes it really difficult.
And then by that time, the box is really getting ready to burst at the seams and explode.
Or it already has. And we've had to like hide that or try and mismanage it, because a lot of the people aren't equipped to deal with that kind of outburst or struggle. And then that leads to even like worse mental health status. It leads to problems at home, anger issues, stuff that people really frown upon, those really nasty outbursts of emotion that just like aren't acceptable for society.
Right.
And it's just because they've been ignoring them for so long.
And then I'm sure along with that is the shame and the guilt and all that other just cascade of negative emotions that go along with it.
It's like a perpetual tornado that just keeps showing up. And it's something that I recognized in a crew. And it's something that I recognized in myself after a while. It took some time, but it's something that soon became important to me after I got injured. I think it was 2017 fire season. As a firefighter, you think of things in seasons. So each year tends to be a different time. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I had gotten hurt in an incident where I had tripped over something and I hit a open fire truck door with my head with a helmet on. And I won't get into the gory details in case people are a little sensitive to that, but I ended up with a very large laceration on my scalp and then a pretty substantial TBI. And I was in a very rural part of Wyoming, and we ended up going to the hospital and they stapled me up and sent me home. And you trust the doctors, right? So I said, okay, they sent me home,
I don't
I'm good
anymore.
to go.
Yeah.
Well, I much less do nowadays. I went back to another hospital a couple of days later because I was still throwing up. And they gave me some Zofran and sent me home and said, go back to work. So I was like, okay, I must be fine. So I went back to work. That was a pretty rough season for me. It was very busy, which is usually good because you want to stay busy. You want to keep going out and making money and having fun. But it's just like my mental health just deteriorated so quickly. I ended up breaking my thumb that season too, which is just add insult to injury. But
okay, so let me back up because I'm also a physical therapist and I'm thinking about what happened to your head. Did you have a subdural hematoma? Did you have a bleed?
Possibly, because the second hospital I went to, my blood pressure was so low it kept hitting the alarm, but they just kept turning it off.
Oh my God! So they never did like a CAT scan or anything?
Nope.
Oh.
And they told me I was fine. So I assumed in my altered state at that point that I'm good to go, right?
And they knew what they were talking about. Yeah.
Well, so I trust people a little less nowadays because of that. But
no, that's my girl. Good.
Yeah. I went through the rest of the fire season up through about September, I think. And it was just like my emotional health started to deteriorate. It was like the box was just exploding every other day. I was having anger outbursts. I was really frustrated. I couldn't communicate effectively. My sentences were kind of garbled. My words were slurred. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep for more than about 2 hours at a time. So I just sleep in chunks, and I already wasn't getting enough sleep. So it just made it worse. My crew members were really mad at me, and I kept thinking it was them because I thought they told me I was fine. So I had to be fine, right? And that definitely wasn't the case. And I finally got to the end of the season. We weren't even really quite done yet. My boss had come to me and says, I can't have you work for me anymore. This isn't working. And I was actually really offended. It's like, why are you firing me? He said, well, there's something wrong with you. And I said, no, there's not. In my infancy, I guess. And I had gone back to my family after that because I was just kind of having a really hard time. And they said, well, there's something off. And that was kind of big for them to say because they're the people that don't talk about anything.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. So I finally made enough money over the fire season to go see like a fancy neurologist back in Denver. And he was basically like, what the hell happened to you? I was like, I don't know. Tell me. And they ended up doing, I think, one scan, but at that point it was like so late. It's 6 or 7 months later. It was so late in the game. He said I didn't see too much residual, though there were a couple of just weird spots they couldn't really identify. There's a little crack in the skull that was kind of obvious from the damage that had happened before, that it healed pretty nicely. But he said, well, we're going to just send you a whole bunch of specialists and just see where you end up on a bunch of the spectrums and see what we can do. Kind of like shotgun effect of like mental health ideas. So I went to a psychologist, a psychotherapist, a speech therapist, an occupational therapist, a regular therapist. Like, it was just all the time. And it was nice enough that they were all in the same place. So it was all in the same hospital. And I would go work swing shift. I would go nap for a couple hours. I go to the hospital. And I go take a nap, have some dinner, go to work. And it was just that I did that for like 8 months, I think. And I just made that my routine. Was I'd go to work and then I'd go get better. And then I'd go to work and go get better.
And then what type of work were you doing at the time? Were you still?
I had picked up another side job as a security officer.
Okay.
Because I still wasn't fully like prepared to go back to anything really critical. I had recognized at that point that I just didn't feel super confident in my abilities to take on a super stressful situation and like resolve it effectively as a leader or as a public servant.
Well, that was a good judgment call on your part. So actually you still had that part of your brain intact.
Just a little bit. I didn't say everything went away, but it was interesting for me to pick up pieces that weren't there. And just the difference that I saw, especially with the speech therapist, was the guy that had helped me most, was just like the tests that he ran the day I walked in there and the tests that he ran the day I walked out were very different. It was the similar test, but just like the results were so different. And I couldn't really see it because my brain was progressing the same as I was like working through all the therapies. And that just made sense to me. Like, yes, I'm working and getting something out of it. And I kind of forgot like where I had come from almost. And I saw the psychologist really wasn't much help because she basically just ran some tests and then prescribed a whole bunch of medication. And I am not a medication person. I don't want to take medication. I don't like it. And I said, well, this isn't really going to work for me. So I guess I'll keep trying. I said, I'll take them until I find something else that works. And it didn't take very long for me to just quit taking them, quit ordering them.
So let me ask you just really quickly, what was it with the speech therapist that really helped? Was it with your cognitive function or was it with your actual phonation and your speech itself?
It was less the speech part, mostly because some of it was just like a little bit of stuttering. Word selection was kind of a big thing for me, but most of it was just like cognitive processing. Okay. So the information that was coming in, I was not processing fast enough or fully. So the output or the communication that I was giving back out was not appropriate or made any sense. And that was kind of something that I didn't see. So he made it so that I could process things effectively. We actually ended up doing a lot of math, which was interesting because I'm like, well, I'm here for speech therapy to learn how to talk and communicate. We did a lot of math to try and get my brain to pick out from start to finish. How do you take this information and continue to hold it like in a cognitive process until the end and produce an effective result? But it was mostly the person that he was to try and help me. He recognized that I had gone through a lot of stuff and was trying to get to a place of what I thought, excellence. You have to be a really effective leader as a first responder. And he was just a person that really understood that and really helped me through it. And I appreciated that very much. So if you are, as a listener, going through something and you ask for help, number one, great, because that's like 3/4 of the battle. Do some shopping around and find somebody that works for you. You interview a client or a counselor, a therapist, or a practitioner, whoever it is, just as much as they interview you. You have to be a good match for each other. And that's something that's very important to me. It's something I still work with a lot of my clients with is if we're not a good fit, I don't want to work with you because I don't want to get subpar results trying to force something that's not really going to work.
Excellent advice. And just to add on to the end of that little gem, that jewel of wonderful, very valuable advice is don't be afraid to say, hey, this isn't working for me. It's not you, it's me, whatever, but just grab your bags and run.
There's always something out there. Things always change too, because I changed therapists 2 or 3 different times when I had first started looking for one. And I actually had the first one kind of insult me. So that didn't go over very well. But,
ooh.
Shop around. That's definitely something that's interesting to you. And you don't have to stay in it forever. It doesn't have to be something that you have to like do for the rest of your life. It doesn't have to be something that you only use in critical times. Like, oh my gosh, I've had a trauma and I'm having trouble. awesome, use it. But you can also use it for, I need to reset and reorient my goals and values. I need to build up some resiliency in my physical and emotional health to deal with anything that pops up, because life is not just an easy water slide.
No.
It has some bumps in it for sure. So these are kind of resources that you can use that I use myself. I don't have a therapist anymore, but I have a teacher and a mentor, and somebody else that I look up to. I have 3 different people that I continually learn from and conversate with and do like retreats and learnings and classes with, because that information leads me to be a better practitioner. It allows me to have more experiences, gain different knowledge on all sorts of different levels. So it makes me feel good, makes me have great experiences and be more resilient, but also helps my clients. And that's something else I've realized too, is just when we work with a client, their stuff usually brings up my stuff.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So I love being able to just open up, and sometimes I'll even tell them like, wow, that's really interesting, that here's how we're going to sell it for you. But thank you for like opening that conversation up, because now it gives me more to think about.
So thank you for bringing up the mentorship, or, you have a teacher, a mentor, that is so important in any aspect of your life. I mean, whatever field that you're in, even if it's something recreational, to have somebody that you can ask questions and somebody who can be a teacher and a mentor and help you along the path of just lifelong learning, which is what this journey is. Our bodies and our mind, our spirit are constantly changing, growing, getting those occasional hits in life, some bigger than others. And to be able to have that kind of like that band of support or community of people that you can go to and ask for help when you need it, to help you along the way is really important.
Absolutely. And it can always change too. You can outgrow somebody and kind of use them as a friend instead of a mentor. And a big thing with mentoring and teaching for me is a mentor is somebody that you model, and modeling is really important for me. And I'll get into a little bit of the specifics. Is you want to model excellence. So if I want to learn a new skill, I'm trying to do something in a new form of breath work. I'm a breath work facilitator, but I'm trying to get into more of like the trauma and the holotropic and some of these extra, like more intense versions of breath work. I have somebody that has done that before that I really appreciate and have talked with for a long time. And his version, after speaking with him, works very, very well. He is my model of excellence in that regard. I don't have to model that exact person. I don't have to start dressing like he does. I don't have to, I don't need to take over, but I have found this aspect that I would like to incorporate into my life that I consider excellent. So modeling is then talking to this person, and you need to bring this up beforehand because you're going to end up asking a lot of questions. But modeling is asking them, when you do this process or learn this skill, whatever it is, how do you do it specifically? And you go with, before you even start, what are you thinking about? What are you preparing? What are you getting ready? What's your mindset like? What skills do you already have that you rely on? When you start the event or task or whatever it is there any like tools that are important? What is your mindset? What are your thoughts going through this? What skills are you relying on? Is there anything that you're expecting as like a hiccup? Are there other ways that you need to think about this? Are there other things that also work that you may not need anymore that you've kind of overcome? And then finishing it, what's the purpose? What's the value out of it? Is there anything you need to do afterwards to make different things? So this is the model of excellence, that you get the whole experience and you sit down with the person that you're modeling and get down each little tiny bit of information and make sure and run through that. Now that you've asked all these questions and you've got all this information, that you can replicate it. And if you have good rapport with this person, you can usually go back and ask them additional questions if you run into something weird. But that's very important for any skill. It could be baking cookies. If your mom is an incredible cookie baker, please model her and go through the same steps. How do you set up your cookie baking? What cookie sheet do you use? It can be for any skill in the world. And it's really important that modeling can be used to cut down the time that you learn and excel in these skills. And it's almost like a cheat code, kind of. You're not cheating and just taking over somebody else's work, because you then take that and kind of add your own essence and your own skills and uniqueness to it. But you cut down the time of learning by half, 3/4, whatever it is, 2 times, just by modeling an example of excellence. And if you really appreciate the person, you can tell them that and say thank you. But it's a way to really get ahead in your life and really to use the skills that other people have benefited from, and then use those and then bring even more benefit back into the world, whatever skill you choose to excel in.
So I'm just going to backtrack just a little bit and ask you, this might sound like a crazy question, but at what point, when was it that you decided to go rogue? And that means, after you had, the speech therapist who was so helpful to you and some of the other traditional practitioners, including that, very well-versed or well-rounded neurologist, when was it that you started to explore some of the alternative methods that you studied?
Perfect. It was after like my third or fourth like regular therapist shopping, and I still had that very type A first responder egotistical mindset. I was more open to a lot of different things, but I was still very into like that all this stuff is woo-woo. I don't really like it. I don't like that I'm seeing a therapist. This is ridiculous. And I said, okay, this is one of my, I recognize the pitfall a little bit. And I said, okay, do one thing that I think is stupid and figure out if it's actually stupid. And I talked to one of the therapists that had a friend of theirs that did breath work. And I was like, that sounds ridiculous. Okay, I guess I better do it. I said, okay. I said, it was like $20 or whatever for the first session. I was like, that's not even a lot of money. Just like a 4-hour session, whatever. Cool. So I got up to this little teeny tiny hut in the middle of the mountains. I think it was wintertime. So I had like a nice little fire and everything. And I said, okay, I'm really nervous. Like, I'm so anxious. My heart's beating through my chest. I'm like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done. I don't even think it's going to work. And I love that I was actually journaling at this point in my life, because I can go back and look at that and just
laugh.
I laugh, but be so happy that I did that and I got over it. That's why I love journaling, is just going back to see the progress you made. But so I go into this room, we introduce each other, we go through like intentions and what the breath work is and what it does. And I'm just sitting here like, is this like something I'm really interested in? This still sounds pretty silly. I don't really do it. And I said, well, you've committed to it. Believe in it for the next hour. It's like, I think it was like an hour and 10 minutes of breathing or whatever.
After all, you'd already paid your $20.
Paid my $20. I drove all the way up there. Just do it. And I did the practice of breathing. It took me a while to get into it because my conscious brain was just trying to take over so much. And that's something that happens even when I practice breath work now. If I try and force it too much, it still happens every once in a while. But after kind of just like letting go, and the big word for me, breath work, is surrender, and just like, just let it show up. Let whatever it is show up. And I had this really magical kind of experience of just like reconnecting with who I thought I was and who I thought I wanted to be, and kind of like my soul purpose and what I wanted to do with my life. And it wasn't like this giant revelation of like, here's all the things I need to change in my life because of this one breath work, but it was like, this thing actually kind of worked. I really appreciate the fact that I tried something new and that this actually worked. Like, just breathing in a pattern with some music worked. And now I have this new kind of found respect for myself and for the practitioner of, he was able to facilitate something that was like this really safe container for me to allow myself to do that. And now I'm like, what else can I do that's stupid and hard that I don't really like, that I can because I can still try it and say, no, that was still stupid. Or it can be really full of revelation and just be opening to my new mind, body, spirit. And that was something that it was like, well, what else can we do? And this is when I got into.
I just have to ask this first because I'm really curious. I'm wondering, because I'm sure that this person that you went to could see the skepticism, let's just say, on your face, or just the way you were carrying yourself. And I just wonder what was going through his mind, or, when the session was over and the experience that he had seeing the change in you from that 1 hour long breath work. Had to be pretty phenomenal.
So I'd like to know. I might have to ask him sometime.
I think you should get back with me on that.
Okay. That sounds like a great idea. It'd be really interesting to know. And I'm sure that's kind of like how I feel with some of my clients nowadays, because the practice that I have is technically complementary and alternative health. And it's not traditional Western medicine. We apply a lot of just regular emotional health things that we think should be standard practice that aren't really developed into the Western system because it's more based on money. And our practice is not really based that way. And we really encourage just like emotional health and resiliency and awareness, and just being able to really live in the person that you are and being resilient through the stuff that happens through life.
Mm-hmm.
And
because life is full of hits.
Oh, absolutely. We love being able to practice stuff that's a little bit different,
Mm-hmm.
and not everybody's open to it. And if you're not open to some of the different stuff, then I don't really want to work with you, because it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just going to open, like I said before, and just kind of surrender to it, our sessions are, 8 hours spread over 2 days. So 2 4-hour sessions. It's not very
Mm-hmm.
much when you consider, comparing it to a year or two worth of therapy once or twice a week,
Mm-hmm.
which can still be incredibly beneficial. It's just not what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had people that have had benefit from it. But if you invest in the 8 hours and you see a little life change come from it, wasn't it worth it? If
Mm-hmm.
not, I'll give you your money back. I actually have a money back guarantee. If you don't get the results you want, if you work with me, I'll give you your money back. Because I
Wow.
believe that the stuff that we do should work. I believe
Mm-hmm.
that the change that you want to make should be an investment, but you should also see results from that investment.
So, with all the stuff that I've done with my background and my experience, and I'm with you, I was the world's number one skeptic with any of this woo woo stuff. It was like, first time I went to an acupuncturist, I wanted to wear, the full disguise, the fake glasses and mustache and everything, the trench coat, so nobody could see me going in there, because I would die of embarrassment if anybody saw me going into an acupuncturist's clinic. But I forgot where I was going with this, but just having that sense of openness and willingness to try new things, because I was pretty rigid in my mindset before I started on my healing path. But just so the listeners know, there are so many wonderful things that you can try out there that, are very, very effective. But what you're doing, and you're really not fixing your client, you're giving them the tools to fix themselves.
Yeah. So what we do is very special. It's called mental and emotional release. And it's part of like a coaching program that I set up, and I do regular 6 months worth of coaching with a lot of my clients as well. But we also do something called a breakthrough session, which includes the mental and emotional release, or we just call it MER for short, because sometimes it's a mouthful. It's a concept where we use something called timeline therapy. And it's something where you can kind of travel and acknowledge events on your timeline of your life and your history. And we can even, for those that are open to it, go into past lives or generational trauma and stuff like that, and work on healing some of those. And we really, the whole purpose is to get rid of limiting beliefs, that stuff that really brings down your self-worth on your purpose and stuff like that, your what we call a greater problem. So that stuff that's really underneath the stuff. If I just ask you what your issue is today and you'd come up with something, there's something underneath that, I guarantee it. And we work to try and find what that issue is underneath that all, whether it's I'm not good enough, I don't think I deserve this, I have fear of being hurt or fear of commitment, whatever it is for each person. We try to identify that. And it's kind of one of those revelations for people. I would have never really admitted that or understood it. And now here it is. And now I feel really weird about it. For some people, they feel bad. For some people, like, wow, it feels great to identify that. And then we work on getting rid of the emotional charge on that. Yes, that was something that used to identify you. We're going to release what we call baggage, or kind of that emotional charge, through this mental and emotional release concept, and work you through kind of the inadequate or unwarranted emotional charge. So fear, sadness, anger, hurt, guilt, some of those big things that are universal. Everybody understands those and has those, whether or not you use exactly those words. I've had people say that, sadness doesn't really apply to me because it's something else. Great. We'll work with that something else. Everything is unique to each person. But once we've kind of blown apart those boundaries on some of those emotions, then you can kind of re-understand where your goals and values are at. We'll work with, now that I don't feel this emotional charge from this problem and these limiting beliefs that I had, now I can think clearly. Now I can take action in my life. And it happens very quickly. Like I said, it's just over 8 hours. And I've had clients come up to me and say, I can't believe my problems are gone. I can't believe that person that I was yesterday, had those kinds of issues. It's a complete life change. Thomas and I have a statement. It's you've had the person that you are before a breakthrough session and the person that you are after a breakthrough session. And I've had 2 or 3 done on myself. It's the same results for the practitioners as we do, because we make sure our stuff works first and then we practice it with other people. And it absolutely works. Whether or not you get the exact results you were expecting, most of the time it's not what you were expecting, and that's okay. We everything, and we really hammer on what we call the 4 requisites for change, and it's just 4 steps. It's 1, it's get rid of your limiting beliefs and your baggage. Number 2, it's kind of make your goals and focus yourself on the future. Then it's take action. You got to actually do the work, and then it's focus on those new goals and those action and your new values. And that's kind of where the coaching part comes into it. It's just being a resource for clients and for people that are trying to accomplish those goals and stay focused. And it's like, when shit hits the fan, call me.
Because it always does. Yes, indeed. It's always there.
Absolutely. I have a statement that I really like using for a lot of my clients too. I have all the respect in the world for you and you trying to overcome your problems and you really working towards this, because it's not always easy. Dealing with your life problems can be difficult. I have all the respect in the world for you. I have no respect for your old patterns and problems. We're going to get rid of them, and they're not part of you anymore. Go away.
Beautiful.
Something I have a lot of pride in, because it does work. Like I said, I have that guarantee. Most of us that practice have that guarantee. If it doesn't work, we'll give you money back, because we're so confident that it works.
What is your ideal client like? I mean, who do you serve? Are they always first responders, or do you work with other, lay people in the community who never have been in public service? Who do you work with?
So I'll just share a small bit of information as one of my teachers gave me. Your ideal client is technically you. So if you are a business owner, technically your ideal client is you, but we can get into business stuff later. I work with a majority of people, of my clients are first responders, or are family members, or like spouses or kids of first responders. But I have worked as well just with like regular people. I've worked with people that are trying to build their own business. I've worked with people that are parents of first responders. I've worked with a few people just like locally that have heard of me somehow, that just want to get rid of some of the things that keep holding them back. So yes, a lot of my expertise is in the first responder field, but I have a lot of skills and qualifications that allow me to work with anybody that's trying to blow the boundaries off their problems.
And how long have you been doing this?
This is only about a year professionally, as I've had my certifications, but I have worked with a lot of people in breathwork since I started taking some of those courses.
And do you work with people online?
Yes, most of my courses are online unless they're local to Western Montana, simply because I haven't mastered my skills of teleportation yet. I'm so sorry.
Oh, well, I think Western Montana sounds like a fantastic place to go and do some work on yourself, and a wonderful place to heal.
It totally is. We've got some great hot springs even I could show people around.
Oh, I tell you, Montana, I thought that Colorado was, the ultimate in God's country. And it really is. I mean, I've lived here now 44 years. I'm originally from a small steel town in Western Pennsylvania, which is why I live here. And I had a friend in physical therapy school who was from Montana. And she said, Colorado's nice, but it's nothing compared to Montana. And I thought, well, aren't you very highfalutin? And so then the first time after we graduated, we all did a little reunion in Montana. It was like, okay, I get it now. I know, I get it. I understand.
I still love Colorado. I have family there. I love going back, but this is where I live and I love it.
Well, I still like Western Pennsylvania, and I go back every now and again, and this is where I live. Yes. So how can people get a hold of you? Where can they find you?
My website is mountainmindtricks.com/empowered leadership movement. And there's dashes in between each one of those words. It'll be a link in the show notes. I'm on Facebook at Ann Martin. It's a picture of me in a red plaid shirt if you need to find me. And on Instagram, I am at EliteFire1507. I'm usually a little bit more active on there as far as like messaging and stuff goes, but I also have link trees to like YouTube channels and meditations, podcasts, everything like that. So I am also a co-host on Conscious Fire Culture. It's more based towards us first responders and wildland firefighters, but we really do have some great practitioners and like spiritual level people that are really give some great insights.
So yeah, and that's what I noticed in that podcast is that what you talk about can apply to anybody. It is based on, helping the wildland firefighters. And I would like for you to say a little bit more about that in a second. But first, I wanted to address the other really important people in your life. And they have 4 feet and fur.
I have 2 twin dogs that are obviously the best dogs in the world, because every pet owner that says that is correct.
Yes.
They have been, I don't want to say instrumental, but a really important part of my life as far as healing, because of the unconditional love proportion. Unfortunately, human love usually has conditions. Pet
Mm-hmm.
love usually does not. Almost
Mm-hmm.
never, unless they're really vocal about getting dinner, I guess, like my old cat is. But I have two dogs that are, we believe they're French Shepherds, although I've never had them tested
Mm-hmm.
genetically. So they're kind of a cross between a Dutch Shepherd and a German Shepherd. I got them from a rescue in New Mexico. I don't remember how many. They're almost 8 now, so they're about seven
Mm-hmm.
and a half. So about 8 years ago. And I trained them. I spent a lot of time learning how to train dogs and training them to my own style of perfection. You know, they're always in a really good heel. They don't jump on people. They don't bark. They're great off lead. And that's just how I like them. And they have gone so many different places with me. We do hikes, we do adventures, we do walks around the block every night. We go say hi to the chickens. And there's just something about having a furry companion that just makes your life a little bit better, gives you a little additional happy purpose.
And like you said, that unconditional love is just incomparable. You just can't get it anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just been so mesmerized by listening to you talk about the dogs that I completely forgot the other thing that I wanted to talk about. So
I can drop a couple of tidbits about neuroplasticity because I know you mentioned it earlier.
ooh, yes, and that is one of my favorite topics. So let's go ahead and do that. And if my thoughts clear up, I'll write it down so I won't forget again this time. So, and people who have listened to my show, my audience knows that I do love the topic of neuroplasticity. And actually, what you've been talking about in the work that you do is using the principle of neuroplasticity. And that's another thing, too, that I wanted to mention is that with the wildland firefighters, they are constantly in a state of arousal. They're always in fight or flight. And that's the one thing. Okay, so that's what it was. If you want to talk about neuroplasticity, talk about the sympathetic nervous system. And I finally did remember, I want you to be able to share how the audience can help support the wildland firefighters and what they can do to help contribute in whatever way that they can. So I wrote it down.
Okay, beautiful. So as far as neuroplasticity goes, it was something I did a lot of research on once I started to really heal and what I think become more competent after my injury. Just the benefit and the like reality of actually redeveloping neural pathways in your brain. And it's a phrase that gets thrown around for people that really understand this. It's like neurons that fire together, wire together. It's a process of habit and creation that you can develop, undevelop, redevelop, recreate. The concept of neuroplasticity is you can change regardless of how intense you think your genetics are. And this is kind of a concept that comes a little bit more from Joe Dispenza's work. And he has done many, many tests and different brain scans with this. But if you have somebody like a wildland firefighter that's got chronic back pain, just something that comes up, it may be from an injury, it may be from work, but if it lasts more than like the traditional like Western scope of it should get better in about 3 months, if it lasts for a year, there is a psychological issue with it. It's like if you've had an injury, your brain almost memorized that pain path when you had the injury, and now it's stuck there. And you have to be able to understand that you can refire these new neurons and say, I don't want the pain in my lower back anymore. I want to send endorphins and healing energy and oxygenated blood there. And if you can focus and either meditate or think mindfully about that and kind of focus on rewiring this new thought pattern and these new habits that will support that, whether it's stretching, meditation, different exercise, different path of work, sometimes even, that these new neural pathways can and will form as endorphins or less pain or something even different, more flexibility, whatever it is. These concepts of refiring and rewiring are very applicable. It's not going to happen overnight, however. Those patterns that you have created are there for a reason. It's because you practice them for quite a while. So sometimes it may take some time to kind of refocus and rewire, but it's a concept of also, this is a little bit more on Joe Dispenza's story, but if you have an injury, you don't always have to go see like a Western medical doctor. If you break a femur, please go get that reset because that's kind of a big deal. Western medicine's great for that. After that, you can send healing energy. You can use things like pendulums. You can use things like meditation and mindfulness to guide healing energy and to think about, like, in a visual way, healing the bone and healing the muscles and guiding oxygenated and healing blood flow or light, or however you want to think of it, spirituality, to that area, and really like apply beneficial healing molecules, atoms, and energy especially.
Mm-hmm.
And this all has been proven in many different, like even Western studies and scans.
And for those listeners who are still kind of skeptical, what Anne is talking about is you're actually changing your brain chemistry. And this is something I learned in my Feldenkrais training, that, one of my teachers said, the minute somebody touches you, even, very gently, it starts to change your blood chemistry, your hormones. Of course, this was like the first week of training, and I thought, that is so stupid. I mean, I was so hardwired as a respiratory therapist and understanding blood chemistry from that aspect that it wasn't, and it didn't take very long because my chemistry was changing, but it took about a month as I was into the training that I could feel the minute I would lie down on the mat that was my, mat to do the lessons on, all of a sudden I could just feel my body just release.
And I'll say something too. It's like what you focus on keeps showing up. So if you keep focusing on the good energy, if you keep focusing on this visual creation of you being healthy in the future and being really flexible, whatever it is, being pain-free, and if you focus on it, it's going to show up. You keep creating that image and being grateful for having that like future vision of a healthy self. It's going to show up.
Absolutely. So now let's get to how we, the listeners, can help support the wildland community and what their needs are.
Thank you for asking that question, because it's a lot of things that when fires start to show up that people get really concerned about, but they don't think about in times like, February, where we're at right now, is there's plenty of, so there's no fires on the news. The biggest thing is, please don't bring like Gatorades and waters and stuff to the fires. We have plenty of that. The government provides it and sometimes wastes it even. What I'd really love for people to do is go to their volunteer departments and see what they need. If they need resources or food or prayers, whatever it is, or there's foundations that will provide money to either families of fallen firefighters, firefighters that are requesting some sort of like medical or mental health like resources or emergencies. They'll give money for that. They just provide the most benefit to the community because they've researched and worked with the people that understand the community the most. So one of them is the Wildland Firefighter Foundation. One of them is the Eric Marsh Foundation, and you guys can kind of look these up as far as foundations that support firefighters. One of the other ones I work with is the Wildland Wellness Foundation. It's kind of new, and for those of you that are really against kind of newer and less traditional medicines and therapies, you guys don't have to support that if it's against your beliefs. That's totally fine, but it is somebody that I work with and really appreciate the value from. So that's how we gain support most, and just wave and say hi. I know there's some negative connotations with some people with the Forest Service, which is unfortunate, but everybody's working pretty hard and working with what they've got. So some highs and some smiles are always nice as well.
And we've had a couple of devastating years with fires.
Unfortunately, it looks like it will continue that way until we get appropriate forest management, but that is a whole nother story.
I know. Don't get me started on that one, because, we used to take really good care of our forests here, but that's changed. So any other pearls of wisdom, Anne, would you like to share with the audience before we close?
Changing your life can be difficult sometimes, and finding support and resources can also be difficult because it's hard to reach out and kind of get away from your comfort style. But just taking one step into trying something new, or trying something that may be difficult, or trying something you think is stupid, just to seeing if that $20 will actually make a difference in your life. Just do it. Just do one thing that you don't think or you haven't tried before, and see what happens.
Excellent. I think I'm going to title the show, Do Something Stupid That You Think Is Stupid. see what happens.
Yes.
I just think that's excellent. And thank you so much for being here today. I'm honored to have you on the show. I'm just so happy to, connect with you again and hear your story. And, it was absolutely wonderful, fantastic information. And if you could just one more time, because I don't remember it and I couldn't write it down that fast, will you just please share for the very end of the show the 4 limiting beliefs, or the 4 that that you use, the 4 systems, or the 4
requisites for change.
That's it. Okay, so I was writing some of it down. The 4 requisites for change, what are they?
They're very important. So number 1 is get rid of your limiting beliefs, your baggage, anything that's really sticking to you that's keeping you from achieving your goals. Number 2 is future focus and create goals. We do these in a lot of like military and first responder systems as a SMART goal. So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound, has a time limit on it. And as a bonus, I would recommend writing these in paragraph form instead of bullet form. It makes them more realistic. The third thing is taking action. It's a very simply stated step, but one of the most difficult, because now that you've created these goals, you got to work on them. And the fourth is staying focused on those goals and those actions. And that's where usually some support, whether it's from your friends or your parents or your teachers or a coach or practitioner like me, is very beneficial.
Thank you for going over that again. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Cheryl. I really appreciate and have a lot of gratitude for just being able to share my story and enjoy some time.
And it has been a fantastic story. So thanks a lot. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. I'm not even going to try and recap those 4 points again, but I am going to write them down again, and I'm going to stick them on my refrigerator. So thank you for listening. And that is the way of the Femininja. And that's a wrap on another episode of the Femininja Project. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, be safe, be strong, and until next time, bye now.